The galaxy was wide and full of shining stars, but she felt like she had no place among them. Her name was Leora, born on a world where her people believed in perfection. Every child was judged not only by skill, but also by appearance. From her first breath, she carried a mark across her face, a line of glowing silver skin that her people called a curse. They whispered that she was dangerous, that she was unnatural, and so they rejected her. As she grew, the shame grew with her. Her mother stopped looking into her eyes. Her father stopped speaking her name. Other children pointed and laughed, calling her Broken Star. She learned to hide her face with a dark cloth, wrapping it tightly so no one could see. But no cloth could hide her pain. No silence could stop her loneliness. When she was old enough, her people cast her out. They said she was a threat to their future. With nothing but a small bag and the clothes on her back, she wandered across the empty wastelands of her planet. The skies were filled with storms of violet dust. The ground cracked and dry. She walked for days, her steps heavy, her heart heavier. Nights were the hardest. She curled up in abandoned ruins, the cold biting through her skin. Sometimes she thought of giving up, letting the desert winds take her away. But deep inside, a small spark kept her moving. She did not know what it was. Hope, perhaps, or just the refusal to end forgotten. One evening, as the sun set low and painted the sky with orange fire, Leora heard something strange. A distant hum, steady and powerful, not like the wild sounds of her dying world. She lifted her head and saw lights in the sky, cutting through the dust. They were not the ships of her people. No, these were different. Metallic shapes with white beams glowing, moving with purpose. Her breath caught in her throat. She had heard stories whispered in the shadows, stories of strangers from a blue world far away. Humans, they were called. Some said humans were weak, others said they were clever. But one story always repeated. Humans did not judge the way other species did. They saw value in strange places. They found beauty where no one else looked. Leora wanted to believe, but fear chained her heart. What if they mocked her too? What if they called her a monster as her people had? She pulled her cloth tighter around her face and crouched low among the rocks. The hum grew louder, the lights closer. And then, with a burst of dust, a ship landed not far from her hiding place. The door slid open and figures stepped out. They wore suits of pale metal. Their voices carried through small, glowing masks. She could not understand their words at first, but their tone was not cruel. It was careful, curious, almost gentle. One of them raised a hand, not in threat, but in greeting. Leora's heart raced. She wanted to run, but her legs refused. She wanted to speak, but her voice died in her throat. The humans looked around, scanning the broken land, until their eyes found her. For a moment, she froze, expecting the familiar gasp of disgust, the laughter, the whispers. But no such thing came. Their eyes widened, not with hate, but with surprise. One of them stepped forward slowly, lowering their mask to reveal a smile. It was the first smile ever directed at her, without cruelty. The human spoke again, soft and kind, though she could not understand the words. Her hands shook as tears filled her eyes. She had been rejected by her people, ashamed of her face. But here, under the burning suns of her dying world, strangers looked at her not as a curse. They looked at her as something new, something worthy of attention. For the first time in her life, Leora wondered if maybe the stories were true. The humans did not turn away. They stepped closer, offering her water, holding out their hands as if she belonged. The loneliness inside her cracked, and a tiny warmth spread in her chest. It was too early to trust, too early to hope, but she could not deny the light in their eyes. It was not the light of judgment, but the light of recognition. And so began her story. The story of a girl once rejected and ashamed. The story of how humanity would one day see her true beauty. The humans stood in silence, their eyes fixed on the fragile figure crouched among the rocks. The air between them was heavy, filled with dust and unspoken questions. Leora gripped the cloth over her face tighter, her body trembling. Her heart told her to run, but her legs felt like stone. She had never been so close to outsiders, never been seen by anyone who did not already despise her. One human, taller than the rest, slowly lowered the shining helmet that covered his head. His hair was dark and messy, his skin pale compared to the copper skies around them. His eyes met hers, and instead of disgust, there was warmth. He raised both hands, palms open, gesture of peace. The others followed, removing their helmets one by one, showing faces filled with curiosity, not cruelty. Leora's breath caught. She had always believed the stories were lies, that humans were no different from her own people. But their eyes did not mock her, their lips did not curl with scorn. One of them pulled a small silver flask from a pouch and set it gently on the ground. Then he stepped back, pointing toward it and smiling. Her throat burned with thirst, but fear chained her to the spot. Was this a trick, a trap to lure her out? The humans waited patiently, not moving closer, not pushing her to decide. Minutes passed like hours, until finally, her shaking hands loosened the cloth from her face just enough to drink. She crawled forward, every step slow, her heart beating so loudly she thought they could hear it. She grabbed the flask, her fingers brushing against the cool metal. The liquid inside was clear, pure, unlike the bitter water she had scavenged for weeks. She drank greedily, her dry throat welcoming the gift. When she looked up, the humans were still watching, still smiling, still waiting. And for the first time in her life, no one recoiled at the sight of her silver-marked skin. The tall man knelt down, lowering himself to her level. He tapped his chest gently, then spoke a single word. "Elias," he said, slowly and clearly. Leora blinked, confused, until he repeated it again, pointing at himself. Elias, that was his name. The others followed, each pointing to themselves and saying a word. "Mara," said the woman with kind eyes. "Jonas," said the strong one with a scar on his cheek. "Rhea," whispered the smallest, her voice soft like wind. Names, they were sharing their names, offering a piece of who they were. Leora's lips trembled. She wanted to answer, to tell them her name, but shame wrapped around her like chains. Her own people had stopped speaking it long ago. They had buried it under curses and whispers. But something inside her fought back, a small voice begging to be heard. She touched her chest lightly, her voice breaking. "Leora." The sound was quiet, almost lost in the wind, but the humans heard. Their faces lit up, and they repeated her name together. "Leora," they said, smiling, as if the word itself was something beautiful. Tears stung her eyes, because no one had spoken her name with kindness since she was a child. It felt like a piece of her shattered heart was slowly mending. Elias extended his hand, palm open, fingers relaxed. Leora stared at it, unsure. Her people never touched her unless it was to push her away. But Elias waited, his hands steady, his eyes filled with patience. With trembling fingers, she reached out, brushing his palm lightly before pulling back. The humans did not rush her. They simply nodded, understanding that trust could not be built in a single moment. Instead, they gestured toward their ship, a sleek silver vessel resting on the cracked earth. Its lights glowed warmly, cutting through the dust like beacons. They wanted her to come with them, to step away from the ruins of her lonely world. Her heart twisted with fear, yet also with something she had not felt in years. Hope. She hesitated, looking back at the wasteland that had been her prison. There was nothing left for her there, no family, no home, no future. But still, her feet would not move, the weight of rejection pressing down on her shoulders. Then Mara, the woman with kind eyes, did something unexpected. She knelt and gently draped a soft cloth over Leora's shoulders, as if to shield her from the wind. It was a simple gesture, yet it shattered the walls around Leora's heart. No one had ever given her comfort. No one had ever treated her with such gentle care. Her lips trembled as she clutched the cloth, feeling its warmth. and with a deep breath, she took a small step toward the human ship. The sound of their quiet cheers filled the air, not mocking but encouraging. As the ramp opened and the soft light spilled across the barren land, Leora stepped inside. Her shame still clung to her, but it no longer felt as heavy. For the first time in her life, she was not alone. For the first time, someone had looked past the mark on her skin and seen something else. Not a curse, not a monster, but a person worthy of kindness. And as the door closed behind her, she did not know what future awaited her. But she felt it in her heart. The lonely beginning had ended, and a new chapter, one filled with humanity's light, had just begun. The human ship moved through the skies of her dying world, its engines humming like a deep heartbeat. Leora sat quietly near the corner of the cabin, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The humans around her spoke softly to one another, their voices warm, their laughter gentle. She could not understand every word, but she understood their tone, and it was different from anything she had ever known. No whispers of rejection, no cruel names, only kindness. Elias, the tall human who had first spoken to her, sat nearby. He tried to explain things to her, pointing at objects and saying words slowly. He pointed at the ship's walls. "Metal," he said. He tapped his chest again, "Elias." Then he pointed at her with a gentle smile, waiting. Her lips parted, and after a pause, she whispered, "Leora." The humans repeated her name again, as if celebrating it, and she felt a small warmth rise in her chest. For the first time in years, she allowed her cloth to loosen, showing the silver line across her skin. Her people had called it a curse, but the humans only looked with curiosity, not fear. Rhea, the smallest of them, reached out carefully, asking without words if she could touch. Leora hesitated, then nodded slightly. When Rhea's fingers brushed the glowing mark, Leora's skin shimmered with light. The cabin filled with a faint, silver glow. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly pulled back, ashamed. She waited for them to recoil, to call her dangerous, to push her away. But instead, their faces lit up with awe. Jonas whispered something to Elias, and though she did not understand the words, the tone carried amazement, not fear. The glow faded, leaving her trembling. She lowered her head, whispering in her own tongue, "This is why they hated me." Elias leaned forward, tilting his head, his expression full of patience. Though he did not understand her language, he understood her pain. He placed a hand on his chest, and then gently on hers, shaking his head as if to say, "No shame." Leora's eyes burned with tears. Her people had always feared the light within her, saying it would bring ruin. But these strangers, humans, saw it differently. They did not see a curse. They saw a gift. A power that could be used not for destruction, but for hope. Later, when the ship landed on their larger vessel in orbit, she followed them out with hesitant steps. The halls were bright, filled with more humans, each turning to look at her. Her heart pounded, afraid of their judgment. But once again, no cruelty came. Some smiled, others bowed their heads politely, treating her as if she belonged. The kindness was overwhelming, and her chest felt both heavy and light at the same time. But the light inside her was not something she could ignore. That night, as she rested in a small room they had given her, she dreamed of fire and thunder. She dreamed of herself standing on a battlefield, silver light pouring from her hands. In the dream, her people called her monster, but the humans stood beside her. She woke with a start, her heart racing, her palms glowing faintly in the darkness. The door opened slightly, and Elias stepped in, his face full of concern. He saw the glow and did not draw his weapon, did not call for guards. Instead, he knelt before her and spoke softly, as if calming a frightened child. His calmness soothed her shaking heart. For the first time, she felt she did not have to hide her power. The next day, Mara brought her to a chamber filled with training equipment. She gestured for Leora to try, pointing at targets and giving an encouraging nod. At first, Leora refused, shaking her head, afraid of what would happen. But Mara's eyes carried no judgment, only belief. With a deep breath, Leora raised her trembling hand. The silver light answered her call, bursting from her palm in a beam that struck the target. The air crackled with energy, the room glowing with her power. She gasped, pulling back, her heart filled with both fear and wonder. The humans clapped, their cheers echoing in the chamber. Not a curse, not a monster, but a miracle in their eyes. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Beautiful," though the humans did not understand. For the first time in her life, she had spoken of herself with pride, even if it was only for a breath. The humans saw her not as rejected, not as broken, but as someone with strength. And deep inside, a seed of hope began to grow. Perhaps her power was not meant to bring shame. Perhaps it was meant to bring change. As the stars glittered beyond the ship's windows, Leora realized her journey was only beginning. The humans had seen her true beauty not only in her face, but in the light within her. And though she still feared what the galaxy would say, she knew she was no longer alone. For the first time, her hidden power was not her greatest shame. It was her greatest gift, and humanity had given her the courage to see it. The human ship drifted through the stars, its engines humming like a steady song. Leora walked the long metal corridors, still unsure if she belonged. The humans greeted her with smiles, some even waved as she passed. She clutched the cloth Mara had given her, a reminder that kindness was real. Yet deep inside, a storm of doubt raged, whispering that it would not last. Elias trained her gently, showing her how to breathe, how to focus when her light stirred. Mara guided her hands when fear made them tremble. Jonas tested her strength with mock drills, his laughter echoing every time she surprised him. Rhea, quiet and patient, sat with her at night, drawing small shapes on a pad and teaching her words. Little by little, Leora felt her walls begin to crack. But the galaxy had its own ways of testing fragile hope. One cycle, alarms screamed through the ship, red lights flashing across the walls. The crew rushed to their stations, shouting words she did not understand but could feel in their urgency. Elias grabbed his weapon, his face sharp with focus. "Raiders," he muttered under his breath, and though she did not know the language, she knew the meaning. Danger had come. The vessel shuddered as enemy fire struck its hull. Through the windows, she saw dark ships swarming, their claws of metal glinting like beasts of prey. Her breath caught, her body frozen. She had seen battles before from afar, but never this close, never as part of the hunted. Humans dashed around her, calm but fierce, preparing to fight. Mara pushed a small device into Leora's hand, shaking her head as if to say, "Stay hidden." But Leora's heart pounded, torn between fear and something deeper. The voices of her people echoed in her mind. Monster, curse, shame. She could run, she could hide, and no one would blame her. Yet when she looked at the humans, their courage blazing even in fear, she felt something shift inside. The ship jolted again, lights flickering. Elias shouted orders. Jonas charged toward the docking bay with soldiers at his side. Rhea clung to a console, her small hands steady as she worked. Leora pressed herself against the wall, trembling. She wanted to vanish, but her glowing hands betrayed her fear, silver light bleeding from her skin. Then it happened. The raiders broke through, their armor dark and cruel, their weapons crackling with deadly energy. They stormed the corridors, their voices filled with rage. Humans fought back, blasters flaring, shouts filling the air. The clash of metal and fire echoed through the ship like thunder. Leora's breath came in sharp gasps. She watched as Jonas struck one raider down, but stumbled against another. She saw Mara shield a wounded soldier, her own weapon firing with precision. She saw Elias hold the line, his strength a wall between the invaders and the weak. And she saw fear that these brave humans might fall. Something inside her snapped. Her shame, her doubt, her years of rejection boiled into a single spark. The silver mark on her skin flared, light flooding the corridor. The raiders turned toward her, their eyes widening. And before she could think, her hands lifted, releasing a burst of energy like a star exploding. The light struck the raiders, throwing them back with a crack of power. The walls glowed, the air trembled. Humans and raiders alike froze in shock, staring at the girl who had just unleashed such force. Leora staggered, terrified of what she had done, but there was no time to retreat. More raiders charged, and again the light answered her call, blasting them back with silver fire. Elias shouted her name, not in fear, but in hope. "Leora," he cried, his voice cutting through the chaos like a promise. The humans rallied, fighting alongside her, covering her as she channeled her power. For every raider that fell, her confidence grew. For every human cheer, her shame cracked a little more. When the last raider collapsed, silence filled the corridor, broken only by the hum of the wounded ship. Smoke drifted through the air, the floor scorched where her power had struck. Leora's chest heaved, her glowing hands shaking, her eyes wide with disbelief. She expected them to turn on her now, to whisper curse, monster, danger. But instead, Mara stepped forward, her face glowing with awe. "You saved us," Mara whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude. Jonas clapped her shoulder, laughing even as blood streaked his cheek. Rhea ran to her side, hugging her tightly despite the silver glow still flickering in her skin. And Elias, steady as always, looked into her eyes and said a single word she finally understood. "Beautiful." Tears spilled down her cheeks, mixing with sweat and dust. For so long, her power had been her shame, her reason for exile, her curse. But here, in the heart of battle, it had saved lives. The humans did not fear her light, they embraced it, and for the first time in her life, she believed it might truly be a gift. As the crew patched the ship and treated the wounded, Leora stood quietly, her heart both heavy and light. The fire of battle had tested her, and she had not broken. She had chosen not to hide, not to run, but to fight. And in doing so, she had taken her first step into a new destiny. A destiny where shame no longer ruled her, where her true beauty shone in the fire of courage. The ship was quiet after the battle, its corridors dim with emergency lights. The scent of smoke lingered in the air, mixed with the faint sting of burned metal. Humans moved with purpose, tending to the wounded, repairing broken panels, cleaning away the signs of war. And in the middle of it all, Leora stood with her hands still faintly glowing, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. She expected whispers of fear, warnings to stay away, or eyes filled with suspicion. That was what her people would have done. That was the only reaction she knew. But instead, she felt the weight of hands on her shoulders, not harsh, but steady. Jonas's laugh filled the corridor as he called out her name. Mara smiled softly, her gaze carrying warmth instead of caution. Rhea clung to her side, her small arms wrapping around Leora, as though she was family. And Elias, standing tall, even with a wound on his arm, looked at her with pride. "You are one of us now," he said, slowly, carefully, so she could understand. The words struck her heart like a star igniting. She wanted to deny it, to say she was different, unwanted, broken. But the humans did not see brokenness. They saw bravery. For hours, she wandered the ship, helping where she could. She carried supplies for the medics. She offered water to the tired. She stood guard when asked. Everywhere she went, people smiled at her, nodded to her, thanked her. Her mark glowed faintly in the soft light, but no one turned away. The shame that had chained her for so long loosened with every gentle word. Later, as the ship floated through calm space, Elias invited her to the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly, glittering like diamonds scattered on black velvet. She pressed her hands to the glass, her silver light reflecting against the window. For the first time, she saw herself not as a curse against the backdrop of stars. She saw herself as part of something larger, something endless. Elias stood beside her, silent for a while. Then he spoke. "You think you are alone," he said, his voice low and steady. "But you are not anymore." She turned to him, tears in her eyes, unsure if he truly meant it. But his gaze held no doubt, only truth. Trust was a fragile thing, something she had never been able to give. Her people had broken it before she even knew what it meant. But the humans were different. They were patient. They gave without asking. They stood by her without fear. Piece by piece, her heart began to believe. Piece by piece, she began to let them in. That night, in the quiet of her small room, she took off the cloth she always wore. For years, it had been her shield, her prison, her hiding place. Now she folded it carefully and set it aside. When she looked into the small mirror on the wall, she did not see a monster. She saw Leora, survivor, fighter, and for the first time, she saw beauty in the silver glow. The next day, Mara brought her to a gathering in the mess hall. The humans were eating, laughing, sharing stories of their past. They offered her food, strange but warm, and she hesitated only a moment before tasting it. The flavor was new, strong, but it filled her with warmth. The humans cheered lightly, as though she had passed some unspoken test. Jonas told a story of a battle long ago, making the others roar with laughter. Rhea showed her small sketches, drawings of stars and faces, one of which was Leora's. She stared at the image of herself, drawn with care, her mark shining like light instead of scar. Her hand shook as she held it, unable to believe that anyone could see her that way. But Rhea's smile told her it was true. Piece by piece, her trust grew. Not just in Elias, not just in Mara, Jonas, or Rhea, but in all of them, in humanity itself. They did not see her as a curse to hide. They saw her as one of their own. And though fear still lingered in the back of her mind, it was weaker now, weaker than the warmth of their kindness. As the ship sailed on, Leora began to dream of more than survival. She dreamed of a life where she could stand in the open without shame. A life where her power was not a burden, but a gift. A life where trust was not impossible, but real. And with every passing day, those dreams began to feel closer. She was no longer the girl rejected by her people. She was becoming something else, something stronger. And though she did not yet know what destiny awaited her, she knew this much. Humanity had seen her true beauty, and in their light, she was learning to see it too. The days after the battle passed with a strange calm. Leora walked the ship's corridors without her old cloth, her silver mark uncovered. The humans no longer stared with curiosity alone. They now looked with respect. She had fought beside them, saved them, and in doing so had become part of their story. But in the silence between the stars, her heart still carried fear. One evening, the ship's alarms rang again, but not with the sound of battle. This time, it was a call to the bridge, a message from beyond. Elias led her there, Mara and Jonas at his side, Rhea following close behind. On the great screen appeared the faces of the Galactic Council, beings from many worlds, their eyes sharp, their voices heavy with judgment. Leora shrank back, her breath catching. These were the rulers who decided the fate of entire systems. Her people had whispered about them, calling them the guardians of order. Now, those same guardians looked at her as though she was a threat. Their words were translated for her, each one striking like a blade. "This creature is dangerous," they declared, their voices booming through the chamber. "She wields unstable power. Her kind cast her out for a reason. She must be contained." The humans argued fiercely, Elias standing firm, Mara speaking with fire in her eyes. But the council's verdict was cold. Deliver her to us, or be seen as traitors to peace. Leora's heart twisted. She had expected this day to come. The galaxy could not ignore her forever. Yet hearing the words still cut deep, reminding her of the rejection she thought she had escaped. Her hands shook, the silver light flickering faintly across her skin. Fear whispered to her, urging her to run, to hide, to disappear again. But then she looked at the humans standing beside her. Elias with his unshakable calm, Jonas with his unbreakable strength, Mara with her fierce compassion, Rhea with her gentle hope. They did not step away from her. They did not give her up. They stood taller, closer, as though to shield her with their very bodies. And something inside her shifted. For so long, she had believed she was nothing more than shame. But here, humanity was choosing her, risking themselves for her. The council's voices thundered again, demanding obedience, demanding her surrender. Leora closed her eyes, her breath slow, her heart torn in two. She could let them take her, and the humans would be safe. Or she could refuse, and the humans would face war. Her choice weighed like a star pressing against her chest. Fear screamed inside her. Shame whispered that she was not worth their loyalty. But another voice rose louder. The voice of hope, the voice of the girl who had fought raiders with light in her hands. She opened her eyes, silver glow pouring out, her voice trembling but clear. "I will not hide," she said, her words translated across the chamber. "I will not run, not again." The council erupted in anger, their faces twisted with disbelief. But Elias stepped forward, his voice calm and firm. "Then we stand with her," he declared, his words echoing through the hall like thunder. The humans behind him raised their fists in agreement, their loyalty unshaken. Leora's eyes filled with tears, because never before had anyone chosen her so completely. The council warned them of consequences, of war, of exile from the safety of the alliance. But Leora no longer felt weak, no longer felt ashamed. She stood tall, her silver light burning brighter than ever. For the first time, she had made her choice, not out of fear, but out of strength. She was no longer the girl cast out by her people. She was Leora, the one humanity refused to abandon. When the message ended, silence filled the bridge. The humans looked at her, waiting, not with pressure, but with trust. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "Thank you," she whispered, the words carrying more weight than any speech. And in that moment, she knew her path was set. The great choice had been made, not by the council, not by her people, but by her. She had chosen to stand, and humanity had chosen to stand with her. Whatever storm waited beyond the stars, she was ready to face it. For trust had awakened in her heart, and with it came courage. The council's threats still echoed in the air, but the ship sailed on. Silence lingered among the crew, the weight of war pressing against their shoulders. Yet in that silence, Leora felt something she had never known before, strength. Not because she was unafraid, but because she was not standing alone. Days passed, filled with preparation. Humans trained harder, repaired their ship faster, and strengthened their defenses. Leora joined them, her silver light no longer hidden. She trained side by side with Jonas, her blast striking practice targets. She learned words from Rhea, laughing softly when she mispronounced them. Mara taught her discipline, reminding her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act anyway. And Elias guided her through every step, his voice steady, his trust unwavering. But whispers spread across the stars. The council had declared her a danger, ordering fleets to capture her. Some worlds prepared to obey, fearing the council's power. Others began to question, asking why humans defended her so fiercely. The galaxy was watching, waiting for an answer. That answer came sooner than expected. One morning, alarms blared again, this time louder, harsher. On the main screen, countless ships filled the void, their weapons glowing. The council's forces had come, demanding surrender. The human crew looked to Elias, waiting for his command. Elias turned to Leora, his eyes calm, his voice firm. "This is your choice too," he said, reminding her of the promise she had made. Her heart pounded, fear clawing at her. The faces of her people flashed in her memory, calling her a curse. The council's voices thundered in her mind, calling her a danger. But then she looked at the humans, at Mara, Jonas, Rhea, Elias. They did not see a monster, they saw hope. And she could not let them stand alone. She stepped forward, her silver mark blazing brighter than ever. "Then I will fight," she whispered, her words trembling but strong. Her hands glowed, her power rising like a storm waiting to be unleashed. The humans rallied at her side, their weapons ready, their hearts unshaken. And together, they faced the Council's fleet. The battle began with fire and thunder. Enemy ships unleashed torrents of energy, shaking the human vessel. But Leora's light cut through the darkness, shielding the ship with shimmering waves. Every blast that struck was met with her defiance. Every surge of fire answered by her silver glow. The humans fought fiercely, their courage burning like stars. In the chaos, the Council's voices roared across the comms. "See, she is a weapon, uncontrollable, dangerous." But the humans answered not with words, but with unity. They fought in sync with her, guiding her, supporting her, never letting her stand alone. Together, they became something greater than fear, greater than shame, greater than doubt. At the height of battle, when the Council's flagship loomed close, Leora felt the storm inside her reach its peak. For years she had believed her light was a curse, but now she understood. It was not destruction. It was creation, a fire meant to protect. With a cry, she unleashed her full power, silver energy exploding like a sun. The blast shook the void, tearing through enemy shields, scattering ships like leaves in a storm. The battlefield fell silent, the light fading slowly. And when the glow dimmed, the Council's fleet was broken, their flagship retreating. The galaxy had witnessed it, and the truth was undeniable. She was not a monster, she was not a curse. She was proof that beauty lay not in perfection, but in courage. The humans surrounded her, cheering, their faces filled with pride. Rhea clutched her hand. Jonas laughed through his wounds. Mara wiped blood from her brow and smiled. And Elias, steady as always, placed his hand on her shoulder. "You are not rejected," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You are not ashamed. You are one of us." Tears streamed down her face as she realized the truth. Her people had cast her aside. The Council had called her a danger. But humanity had given her something greater than acceptance. They had given her belonging. They had seen her true beauty when no one else would. As the stars stretched endlessly before them, Leora felt her heart lighten. The girl once lost in shame had found her place. Not as an outcast, not as a curse, but as part of humanity's story. And across the galaxy, her name would be remembered not with fear, but with hope. This was humanity's answer. Not to judge, not to reject, but to see with eyes that looked deeper. And in their answer, Leora found herself. No longer rejected, no longer ashamed, but finally truly seen.